Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 299 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Con Whiteley. And today's episode is on what is psychophysics. And it is the 1st of December 2024 as I record this. So it's the final month of the year, which I think is very exciting. It means we can be productive. It gives us one last month to actually push us to get everything that we want to do achieved by the end of the year. And Psychophysics is a brilliant episode to have just before the big episode 300, which I'm really looking forward to. So psychophysics is one of my favourite topics within biological psychology because it's all about how do we turn physical stimuli into psychological experiences. For example, this is the one that I always use. How does the physical stimulus of chocolate create the pleasure and the taste of a chocolate in our minds? That is basically what psychophysics aims us to look at. So this is a brilliant episode. I think this is just, wow, I think this is just such an amazing topic that I flat out love. And even though I've not actually looked into this since my second year at university, which would have been, maybe 2020. Wow, that's a long time ago. I've still always had this interest in it, and it's only now whether I'm starting to explore this interest even more. This is a great episode filled with a lot of really interesting content. So you've got that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest. And the first one is, could recalling of parties encourage more moderate drinking? It's the morning after a heavy night. Your head is banging, your mouth is dry, your heart is pounding, you're anxious. In this state, it's easy to declare that you'll never drink again. Yet, as the hangover slips away, this avowal is often forgotten. Actively hanging on to memories of a drinking episode, however, might be one way of curbing further alcohol consumption, at least according to a new study by Lazaro Staffom and colleagues. The recent research finds that recalling recent drinking led women to drink much slower, potentially reducing the desire for alcohol and avoiding excessive drinking. Okay, so with it being December, I think this could be a very timely psychology news article for quite a lot of people because there's going to be a lot of parties, a lot of work dues, and a lot of different drinking events. That and if you want to show your drinking a bit more of this holiday season, then it might be an idea to actually take care of this idea about recalling memories of past drinking episodes and how much pain you were in afterwards. Besides that, I'm not entirely sure I can say too much more because I don't drink. I have no intention of drinking. So the next one is, new report advises mental health support for incels. Involuntarily celibates, also known as incels, are a community of primarily male people organized around a perceived inability to attract sexual or romantic relationships. The community is overwhelmingly found online in spaces where high levels of dehumanizing misogyny are the norm, according to research. There have been isolated incidences of these views spilling into online actions, however, and many discussions around whether a counter-terrorism approach or mental health approach is most appropriate. question is at the heart of a recent government report authored by Swansea University's Joe Whitaker, William Costello, and Andrew G. Thomas, exploring the development of the incel community in the UK and US, how the community communicates, and what interventions might be useful. The team concludes that mental health support, rather than a counterterrorism approach, is likely to be fruitful. Okay, this is actually a really interesting article because my supervisor actually does a lot of research into incels. That and because she's at my university in the third year of your degree in the applied psychology module, where you actually have an entire lecture based on incels, and it's one of the most disturbing lectures you will ever get. I mean, because it's just so horrific. Like, these women are these incels actually called in for the rape, beating, and murder of innocent women. So it's horrific and it's flat out wrong, but it's quite interesting to look at in a very dark sense. That was like, because it's so horrific, you actually want to know more about it. And like, it's always like horrific when you see like incels actually take a so-called action and all of that rubbish, which I'm not going to go into. But if you do want to learn a lot more about it, then please just check out my book, A Applied Psychology, available in all the usual places. But I think that it's very good that we have got a mental health support approach. At least in theory, because the government's got it implemented, and this entire thing has to be implemented. It's be interesting to see, one, does this happen? Does this happen quickly? And if there's going to be enough funding and resources behind it, so this can actually be useful, and if this can actually be effective, you can have the most useful interventions around, but if they're not funded properly, then we can have major issues in the future. So, be interesting to keep an eye on that. So, the final one is, it's all in the framing. For many, deconstructing relationships and interactions with parents can be a mainstay of the therapeutic experience. Naturally, as part of this experience, therapists may ask questions about these important dynamics, normally in a neutral, non-leading way, designed to ensure clients can make sense of things on their own terms. Therapists should be aware, though, according to a new study by Lawrence Piffen and Mario E. Hetra, it isn't just negatively framed questions that can change how we feel about our relationships. Even positively framed questions can lead people to reappraise their relationship with their parent. So, out of all the different cognitive biases that I actually learned in my undergrad, the framing effect has actually been one of my favourites. Mainly because I learnt about it in International Baccalaureate Psychology during sixth form. So when I was 17, 18 years old, because I think the framing effect does have a very powerful effects on like how we make the decisions, and also how we impact our relationships and actually think about them. So it's interesting to know that the positively framed questions that can actually have not necessarily a negative impact, but it does have an impact on the therapeutic process. So this is why it's really important for all of us to actually just think about always asking our questions in a neutral, non-judgmental, and non-leading way, because that's how we get the truth out of our clients, or the truth how they see it. Because all of us can have our own biases, our own slightly skewed perspectives. So that's important to bear in mind. So I hope you enjoyed the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. So I actually got to mention that last week, this Tuesday, so in like 2 days' time, that's the 3rd of the December, I've actually got a dyslexia assessment through my university, through a private company. So hopefully I should be able to get diagnosed with mild dyslexia, which would actually be really useful. I'm actually quite looking forward to it. But I also think it's going to be a massive pain because the major thing that bugs me about dyslexia tests, because I do not understand these, which is probably a major symptom of the condition, it's that I actually can't understand the weird patterns that they show you and that they actually want you to take part in them, because what happens is that you're given like four symbols, and all of them are meant to be in some sort of pattern. Then you're given a fifth symbol, and you're meant to either orientate it or you're just meant to put it in the pattern where it fits. I don't understand that whatsoever, because my brain is not made for those sort of activities. So it's that sort of stuff. So I think it's like quite interesting. So I've got that to look forward to in like 2 days' time, and I'm still doing lots of reading support and the breakfast club through my outreach. Plus, I actually did have a really interesting lecture this week, which was on being a clinical psychologist with older people. And there's two things that I actually want to mention here. Here though, research shows that the suicide rate of older people is very, very high. But the reason why no one tends to think about it is just that our general perceptions tend to believe that the only people that commit suicide are young, traumatized men, which I think is concerning, definitely interesting, but it does show that there does need to be a lot more mental health support available for older people. But then this leads me on to the second point though. Lots of the older people are very resistant to psychosocial interventions because, well, for a whole range of different reasons. Well, I know from my personal experience, it's very much a case of they're resistant to it because this is a new idea. They didn't need it when they were younger. This is just a new fad that people have invented. So those sort of things. And I'm doing lots of other different projects and lots of future blog posts. But I'm looking forward to it because it's the last month of the year, which means I've got a lot to do, not a lot of time to do it in. But that does make me very, very happy. So as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave comments at the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi Whiteley, or leave a comment on the LinkedIn post or Facebook post. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And today's episode has been sponsored by Biological Psychology. So this is a great, really easy to understand book that really helps you to gain a deep understanding of how our biology impacts our behavior, because it answers questions about how do our neurotransmitters impact our behavior, how do our hormones, how does evolution impact our behavior, how do pheromones impact our behavior, and that the nervous system is a very complex system which does impact our behavior in multiple different ways. So there's lots of different chapters about that, just you will can get a deeper understanding of it. Plus, we also look at our primal drives. For example, how does our drive around hunger, thirst, and sex actually impact our behavior? And most importantly for this podcast episode is that we look at psychophysics. So it's a brilliant book that really does build upon today's episode nicely. So that is Biological Psychology, available for all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore, or local library if you request it. And if you want the audiobook narrated by artificial intelligence, Now you can add selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Kobo, Google Play, Barnes& Noble, and Every, and selected library systems like Bacon Taylor, Overdrive, and Biblioteca. So while buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And as always, a massive thank you to my patrons, because your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. So if you want to become a patron of the show and get access to tons of great rewards, now you can at patreon.com/the Psychology World Podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Wiley. So that's enough for your personality. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be looking at what is psychophysics. I'm really excited about this episode, so let's dive into it. Personally, I flat out love learning the single lecture about human perception because of a single area of psychology that focuses on the intersection between our physical environment and our psychological experiences. That is what the area of psychophysics aims to study and expand our understanding of human perception. For example, right now at the time of writing, I'm listening to some coffee shop jazz live stream on YouTube, and that was my physical environment, and it's helping me to concentrate, relax, and feel content. So why do I feel like this? Because I have physical music playing in the background. Equally, why do I feel happy, which is the psychological aspect, when I listen to I Will Survive or Carol of the Bells? I've actually got to start listening to that more. Or when I watch Hot Stopper on Netflix. Why do these physical experiences cause me to have a psychological sensation or feeling? This is why psychophysics is so important to understand why the physical world impacts us. Overall, psychophysics is the empirical study of how the physical world and our psychological experiences intertwine, and this allows us to expand our knowledge about human perception. What do psychophysicists research? So, like most areas of psychology, there's an infinite number of topics to study, even within a subfield of psychology. For example, I conduct mental health research, but within mental health, you can study treatment modules, treatment effectiveness, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, sexual disorders, bias cognitive processes, and on and on and on. Psychophysics has a lot of different avenues for researchers to explore as well. For instance, one researcher might want to study how to say just noticeable, probably the only concept of this topic that I remember from a second year undergrad, change in light levels impact someone's perceptions of a stranger. Then again, another researcher might want to investigate how a change in the sugar content of a cake changes the level of happiness we experience if we eat it before an exam. Lastly, a researcher could investigate how temperature impacts and warps our perception of time and how much fun we're having. There are so many different areas that you can research within psychophysics. Ultimately, psychophysics is all about the fascinating relationship between our sensory experiences and our physical stimuli. In other words, psychophysics aims to decode how our brain makes sense of the world and create psychological experiences for us, just like why listening to coffee shop jazz helps me to relax and focus. What is threshold theory and signal detection theory? Once you learn about psychophysics at undergrad level, you are getting introduced to a threshold theory, as this is a major theory that aims to explain how a physical stimuli impacts our perceptions. The theory investigates how the minimal amount of a stimulus is needed for a person to detect a psychological sensation. For example, how much sugar is needed for a chocolate bar for it to taste sweet to a person. As you can imagine, this changes for everyone. So let's say that 5 grams of sugar is needed for Isabella to say a chocolate bar is sweet, whereas Barbara might only need 1 gram of sugar. This leads us to another theory. Signal detection theory builds upon threshold theory by adding a decision-making element in perception, because this theory proposes that perception isn't only about the strength of a stimuli. Instead, it is about the strength as well as our ability to detect the stimulus. And I'm actually quite a good example of this, because my spicy taste buds are nowhere near as sensitive as the rest of my family's, so they can be dying after eating a spicy dish, but I can be fine and act like it's nothing. Therefore, not only is my threshold of spice higher, it could be argued that my ability to even detect spice could be lower than theirs. Moreover, signal detection theory has a lot of interesting real-world applications that go beyond the scope of this podcast episode, such as this theory can explain how radiologists can spot tumours in X-rays and why people sometimes think they've heard their phone buzz when it actually hasn't. What are Weber's law, Fetcher's law, and Stevens' power law? Considering I live with 2 physics students whom are constantly talking about different laws of physics, I feel that this is definitive proof that psychology has mixed perfectly with physics to produce this intersecting discipline. Therefore, Webb's law proposes that the just noticeable difference between 2 stimuli is proportional to the magnitude of the stimuli. In other words, if you have 2 chocolate bars, one with 1 gram and another with 2 grams of sugar, then two other chocolate bars, or with 2 together, one with 10 grams of sugar and another with 11 grams, it is easier to tell the first 2 apart because the first 2 have a greater magnitude. Building upon this, Fetcher's law proposes that the perceived intensity of the stimuli is proportional to the logarithmic of its physical intensity. For instance, the hotter the physical stimulus of a chili, the greater the psychological sensation of spiciness. Finally, Stevens' power law proposes that in reality, the relationship between the physical magnitude of a stimuli and the perceived intensity of the psychological experiences can be described as a power function. This law has been applied to sensory modalities like the perceived loudness of a sound as well as brightness perception. On the whole, when it comes to these theories and the laws, these are the key concepts that help to form the foundation of psychophysics and our expanded understanding of how physical stimuli create psychological experiences. Why does psychophysics matter? Using psychophysics in the real world. Sometimes I think a major problem that all sciences have, including psychology, is that after looking at the theory behind a concept, we end up getting confused about why this is useful to know, as well as I often question, why is this psychological concept useful in the real world, as I'm a firm believer that the entire point of science is to help improve lives and to make the world a better place. When it comes to psychophysics, this has real-world implications because it helps us to understand our senses like hearing, taste, smell, sight, and our feelings. Also, it helps us to understand how our senses adapt in response to the environment. For instance, habituation is the process of us not noticing a physical stimulus after a while, once we know it doesn't pose a danger to us. Like we notice a fan starts up, but after a while we stop noticing the fan's noise. Moreover, psychophysics really helps the decision making and cognitive psychology research, as psychophysics deepens our understanding of how we perceive and process information, as well as it shows us how our complex cognitive processes work. For instance, psychophysics research on how our brains process temporal information is useful for understanding multitasking and eyewitness testimony. Lastly, if we look at clinical psychology, psychophysics allows us to better understand, assess, and treat sensory disorders, such as we can now create more accurate hearing tests and create therapies for conditions like schizophrenia, where all our senses blend together. This is only possible because of psychophysics. There are more applications, but you will get the gist. Psychophysics is very useful to our understanding of human behavior. What is the future of psychophysics research? In case you're interested in psychophysics research and you might want to conduct your own in the future, you might want to be aware of the trends. For instance, psychophysics research is starting to use a lot more neuroscience and brain imaging technology, so researchers want to combine the traditional psychophysics methods with the cutting edge techniques that neuroscience provides us. These include using fMRIs and EEG techniques to study the intersection of our physical environment and psychological experiences. Especially, these cutting-edge techniques allow us to see what's happening in the brain as we feel these experiences. And I still maintain I would flat out love to be part of a fMRI study because it does sound fascinating. Additionally, with the rise of virtual and augmented reality, psychophysics researchers are wanting to incorporate this new technology into their studies. You could create a virtual environment and stimulate or manipulate it to induce certain phenomena and make predictions about human behavior. For example, if you wanted to study the psychological sensation of overwhelm, then you might want to create a virtual environment of a mosh pit at a concert and put someone in there. Now, I hate the idea of mosh pits because of my autism and they sound like hell on earth. Anyway, that is the potential idea for a future research. Ultimately, virtual reality allows you to control every single aspect of someone's sensory experience. Finally, computational models could be a future trend in psychophysics research because if you create a large computational model of people's perceptual processes, then you can refine and test theories in ways that weren't previously possible for researchers. Conclusion. Even though I always tell people that I flat out love psychophysics as a topic, it's been years since I've looked into it, and I'm very glad that I've returned to the topic. Sure, I'd forgotten how many theories and laws are in those, but it's fascinating to understand how physical sensations create psychological sensations in the brain. That is amazing to me. Therefore, as we spoke about threshold theory, signal detection theory, Webb's, Stevens' power, and Fetcher's law, I want you to know about that this might be a complex area. Yet in psychology, and when it comes to your interest in this great profession, never let complexity stop you. If you've enjoyed today's episode, then keep exploring, keep learning, and keep developing your interest in psychophysics or another area of psychology. All what you truly need to be successful in a science is a passion for a topic. It is that passion that will drive your learning, your improvement, and you wanting to do the best you possibly can. I'm not interested enough in psychophysics to ever want to research it for my career, but it keeps me interested in psychology, along with hundreds of other tiny topics. And that's why I love psychology, I love this podcast, and I love my life. Passion really is the key to success. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I know that I did, because it's always fun now to come back to topics that I'm passionate about, but I've let fall down by the wayside because I've been busy and focusing on a lot of other topics. If you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to know more, definitely check out Biological Psychology, available in all the usual places. And if you want to support the podcast on a monthly basis, then please check out patreon.com/the Psychology World podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Wiley. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwiley.net. So have a great day and I'll see you next time.